Hey, thank you for the raid, Tony. So, oops, let me share my screen. Wrong one. Thank you for the raid, Tony. For those who don't know, I just started the stream, and for today, I'm gonna review one of my Patreon subscriptions. Their challenge run from yesterday. They lost their winning in yesterday at 4-1. So they went 4-2 overall. I think they finished 15th or 16th. I don't remember. But they asked me to review the 6 matches. The 5 that they selected were rounds 2 through 6. I'm omitting the first one because that was just the mirror match. I think the opponent was on the Nettle version of the deck, and the and then Chris here. Thank you for the follow, Julian. Chris here won the mirror match 2-0, but the mirror match is not particularly interesting because typically whoever goes first wins, or especially if they have turn 3 natural order. A little bit. Thank you for the follow, Ionic Chochi. I think is that how you pronounce it? I think a little bit has changed it, especially if you're running the snuff out, because that can kill the Archon. But more or less, it's still just a race. But I will. Um, I have not seen their. I have not seen this video yet, but yeah, they wanted to see if they potentially misplayed and lost their, winning in as a result. Thank you for the follow. Scared monkey won't make money. That's a true statement for sure. But yeah, at this point here, Gandalf 13 Christopher is 1-0 in yesterday's challenge, the Saturday one, and after beating the mirror, and we'll continue from there. Like I said, I have not viewed this yet, but I'm just doing a review. So we'll start. And I do know that they were 4-1 and lost round 6. But aside from that, I don't remember much from what they said. Pretty reasonable keep here. What did they bottom? I think I missed it already. I think they put it back a land, which is fine. Here I would fetch first before the Once Upon a Time, only because we want to hit either a Cradle or a relevant, more relevant spell. I got a question here. I was in the house on the east. Yeah, hi, Yerrick, how's it going? Uh, so what did they get? I have to look. They got a Visionary, which is good, yeah. I think here in the dark, given that we have the Birchlow Rangers, probably okay for sequencing reasons to leave with the Shepherd, especially if you know they're on some kind of combo deck. Hey, how's it going, Legacy Goblins? Looks like it's Reanimator. This matchup, unfortunately, not that interesting either. It's generally comes down to a density of hate. Sometimes you can steal game one if your opponent like goes for a Chancellor or something strange like that, or if you just happen to have the natural endurance. Reclaimer is good, but only on the play, and that assumes they don't have the turn one as well. But game one, I don't think this matchup in general is that interesting, and especially game one. Um, I think a turn one resolved Archon is probably just game over. If I remember correctly, I think I saw him post, Chris post his tournament report. Well, this is what's it called? This is yesterday's challenge, Legacy Goblins, and I think ever since Canister played, I think I want to call it the new school Reanimator list, which is like more Archons in the main. I mean, Archon's a good thing, right? We play one ourselves, but yeah, more Archons in the main over the Chancellor. It's just a better reanimation target, right? Like, yeah, that. So Chris taking no time, just conceding because there's really no point in my opinion. Sometimes you can steal if your opponent really, really misplays, but I think it's gonna be hard to lose to beat an Archon. I would mold this hand. Doesn't really do anything against Reanimator. Yeah, so our opponent did that. I mean, Chris did that. I would probably keep this hand, especially if your opponent thinks you might be on like endurance or their ley line, because on the play, I think a reclaimer will get there more often than not, because your opponent is slowing down with, your anti-graveyard hit cards. Sorry, anti-graveyard hate. Pretty reasonable hand. I think here I just fetch first before the once. Same thing. Um, so something for Chris to potentially to change in the future. Only because you dig one deeper with the Once Upon a Time if you fetch out the one force, right? Your Bayou, presumably. In most cases, the Reclaimer should go the distance here outside of a turn one. And outside of you drawing the bog, obviously. But Seiju in this matchup also has text in that it can answer an animate dead. Given that we drew the second one there, I think I would probably just play the first one. Only because the fetch land can represent an arbor later, but that's kind of minor, but can make a big deal. Or not make a big deal. It can matter, but generally more of a minor mistake, I think. Um, should get a Cradle here, but yeah. So on the next turn, right, you would have a fetch land that can represent arbor if need be. Here we drew another fetch land, so it didn't matter. But I think you just play out the Heritage Druid and the Shepherd and represent lethal potentially pretty soon. Um, Chris opted to keep the fetch land for an Arbor, which is okay. The problem is you don't really want to fetch the Bayou away anyways because of top deck Thoughtseize. Um, so yeah, I would have played the Boseiju, played the Heritage Druid, and then Reclaimer that away for the Arbor instead. And then you're representing then a two-turn clock. Unfortunately here, you drew the bog, which is awkward. Um, I think here we have to bluff. I kind of agree with. There's two lines of thought, right? Like, given that I feel like we have to kind of bluff in case we draw. Oops, I would have gotten the arbor, a second arbor there. But in case we buy ourselves a turn to what is it called? To top deck either endurance or Thoughtseize. You don't want to force your opponent into going for the kill, right? And our opponent here, we had exactly lethal, so kind of an interesting game. I felt like our opponent potentially messed up there. Probably should have gone for it. They had it. This is a snap keep. It's got 3 layers of protection. 2 fast, 1 slower. So here, you're kind of gonna relegate the Arbor to the Endurance pitch and lead with Thoughtseize, and then turn 2 Reclaimer, and then hopefully untap on turn 3, and that should be game. I think here you take the looting. Our opponent has kept some somewhat suspect hands, I think. They did more to 4 though, so maybe that's why. It's good to have all the tribal here, right? We have to get in the chat here. I got elves and goblins. Yeah, so I think here leading with Arbor there is okay, and then our opponent conceded because we have a soft lock. Again, this matchup is not particularly interesting. And even without Layla of the Void, I think we are favored. But only by a little bit, I think. With Leyline, you should be pretty favored. Pretty generically okay hand here. Probably lead with the Heritage Druid. And the logic typically is because, and the logic is because if your opponent has a removal spell, you're not going to get to 3 elves anytime soon, anyways. There are some reasons to lead with Shepherd, but they typically involve something like an 8 cast matchup where they don't have removal and you just want to strand forces in their hand. There are some players who will preemptively force your whatever you do turn one. It's kind of annoying when they do it because it's not necessarily even the right play, but can sometimes get you. Like it can be the right play depending on their hand, but a lot of times it is not. So here you go Verdant into, in my opinion, I would have just gone with Thoughtseize. I mean, the Visionary because you want to be yeah. So actually, Fox, what was reckless? I would have just gone with the Visionary because I like to use my mana efficiently. Oh, okay. It sounds like maybe HC Fox is talking about going with um the Shepherd here. I thought you're talking about True Hero taking the glimpse. Yeah, I can see why they took the glimpse, but it's not going to line up well for them that they did because the Shepherd is going to be able to get the Visionaries through. Angler is kind of an interesting choice though. Oh man, our opponent walked into that. So pretty clean turn there. I didn't see anything I would have done differently. Snuff Out is a pretty cool card that we've adopted ourselves. Interesting that we bounced the Shepherd. I don't think I would have. And here's my logic. Um, like, if you're scared of removal, oh sorry, you're scared of removal. We can't Dino Bash anyways the following turn, so I still would have just bounced the Visionary there. Maybe it would misclick. It's hard to say. Yeah, being down to five, right? Snuff Out is essentially turned off now. The elf player should be pretty favored from this point game one. Like in general, when you've gone wide against these tempo based decks, the blue based tempo decks, they have a hard time dealing with. I would have fetched the Arbor there. Um, Unless the Arbor's gone and I'm not aware of it, the second Arbor. I can also speed this up if this is a little slow for. Let me see, how do I do this? This is a little bit slow for viewers. Where is it? Settings. 1.25. I'm not quick enough or sharp enough at the moment to play on like maybe 1.5 speed and just like commentate. but that should be game. Let's see, there's a 1.1.5 speed as well. I guess we can try it, and then I can pause if need be. Turbo dead. Only because then we can get to a league pretty quickly, right? Should be game, yeah. Yeah. Hey, for those who don't know, so Ming Empire is Gandalf 13 with the subscription feedback here. I mentioned a few things you can clean up already, so you might want to watch the review if you missed the beginning. But nothing major that I saw. I think the one thing that didn't make any sense to me, I think I mentioned a few times, like fetching before the Once Upon a Time, only because you want to increase your odds of a good hit. And there was one other thing that I don't remember. I think end step Dryad Arbor off the top of my head was another. But for the most part, pretty clean otherwise. Yeah, this is heads up, by the way. In general, you want to lead with elves on turn one, but given the redundancy, and you're hoping that they have a removal spell, you lead with the symbiote there. So it might be a snuff out response here. Sure. And heads up by not playing the Arbor preemptively, right? You want to keep your opponent guessing. I think on that board state, I probably play the Reclaimer. Um, Only because the logic is you force them to have another removal spell, and I think you rather want to untap potentially, force them to essentially play removal. They happen to have it there, but if they don't, the Reclaimer can threaten a more proactive board state. Yeah, I understand the protecting the shepherd, which is reasonable as well, depending on what you're trying to go for. Especially getting the glimpse in hand, that's like fair. So a little bit of a sequencing. I'm gonna pause for a second. A little bit of a sequencing thing there. I think I would have cast the Once Upon a Time first, in case we draw a Birch Lore, right, or something relevant before leading with the Reclaimer. Also, it's possible we just draw another Reclaimer, and you don't want to give them full information, right? Like if we had two Reclaimers, then there's a mystery card in their hand now instead of giving them full information, right, off the Once Upon a Time. So a little bit of a sequencing thing there. Interesting. What is going on? Yeah, yeah. So Chris, you mentioned the attack there. I don't think that makes much sense. This is like a reasonable, right? I think you probably want to bottom the natural order. Bottoming only because you have less mana to get to natural order, right? Like you're more likely to get to Gris. As a general rule of thumb, I told this to. Well, actually, I guess I'll mention this now. I recently somebody reached out to me for coaching. If that is something that anybody in the audience would be interested in the future, uh, after having tried it, as because somebody really wanted me to coach them, I realized that it's not as I guess I'm probably better at it than I thought I would be. So I'm more open to it in the future. And if you want coaching for this deck or just in general, you can just DM me or whatnot. It would be right now, the going rate would be $40 an hour, but that could be negotiable if need be. was playing towards the end of, I thought that was one. Um, I I actually think there's a few ways to win this matchup, and that is WoW one of them. I just against these Wasteland Temple blue shells, I tend to really value being able to play things on time, like, because that's one reason why I would keep the Gris over the natural order. Not like I don't really care about getting the natural order counter. I'm more concerned about it not um, being castable and then you falling behind and just having virtual dead cards, right? So, for what it's worth, I do think Shadow is the hardest um, tempo shell for elves to play against. So, that's something to keep in mind, I guess. I think okay, yeah, a little bit of a sequencing thing there. If you're just gonna play basic force, you should lead with a Once Upon a Time first, in case they want to force it for some reason. So I think the biggest thing I've found so far was yeah, I understand. I saw that in the chat, Chris. I didn't. You can't see it here in the window for the audience, but I saw it because my picture in picture here is blocking the chat. But I did see you needed to you're low on time because of that. Looks like we're playing against Hogak here. Irony is the Gris has text at the moment. That's even better actually. I think I would have sequenced that. Well, it's awkward because of the altar. Yeah, the altar is definitely very awkward in that situation. I I think I would have, given that we top decked the endurance. I think I would have actually just not played the Gris, and then holding endurance up. The only thing it's just tough though because of the altar, but if not for the endurance top deck, I'd probably make the same line and just try to get the bridge off the board. They pitch, of course, in response, but that one you can't really do anything about, right? Yeah, altar is brutal in this matchup. So Francisco's in the house here. Yeah, the milling us I think is because of the in response to the endurance trigger. So they know it's going to be shuffled back, and they're trying to hit relevant tutor targets off the top. Is my guess why they did that, Francisco. Yeah, I kind of agree with that, Chris. I think you were probably going to lose this match, this game regardless. Um, I think for the most part, like you play especially with this deck, it's difficult to play perfectly. I think for the most part, you play pretty cleanly. The only thing I would say so far that caught my eye for sure is the sequencing with Once Upon a Time at the beginning of the game. You might be right. Jerry, can you turn on the light? It's dark on the screen, that's why. You might be right on the Prince Francisco on that. I have to look when they did the first. What's it called? Yeah, I would definitely mill myself first. But if they did that before the endurance, that doesn't make any sense. I just assumed right there that was in response to the endurance. Force of Vigor is kind of a high variance card in my opinion. This matchup, I probably would not have boarded it in because um, it answers alter, but like not very well. You're down a card and they can just like sack a bunch of things in response. The Reclaimer there was good. Let me go back actually. So okay, there. That's the opening hand. I think given this is the opening 7, I would probably mull because I think we can potentially do better. This is like a mull to 6, and this is like a very combo-y hand. I may keep this on 6 though. Oops, did I skip that? I'm going too fast. I'm gonna slow it down 1 second. I'd keep this 7 to be honest, because of the endurance. And given that this is on 6, I'd probably keep this as well. This is 5. I'd probably keep all those hands to be honest, Chris. And the logic is this is not Reanimator. You can actually race them. Yeah, I think your heuristic here is a little bit different than if you're playing against Reanimator. Like against Reanimator, I would agree. Like you want to mulligan aggressively. Maybe not necessarily for like I would have kept a 7 for sure, even against Reanimator, because we're still a critical mass deck, and I just don't. I would rather not mulligan. So Julian has mentioned this before in like his streams, where like he will keep like 4s out of 10s, for instance, compared to like 6 out of 10s otherwise with other decks, because this deck doesn't mulligan very well, but it top decks well, if that makes sense. So like even if your hand is like very speculative, there's a lot of live draws with respect to elves. Especially one with Reclaimer because of the graveyard implications, right? So I definitely, yeah, would have even kept that 7 against Reanimator. And definitely against this deck, I would have kept the 6 and 5 as well. What am I seeing? Okay, you did that on upkeep. It's often hard to beat Crab when you get into a grindy matchup. Um, we'll see what happens, I guess. Wow, what a top deck. But this is what I mean, right? Like, especially, you know, your tribal 3/4 here, Reclaimer and Endurance, can do a lot of work in the sense that in these graveyard, especially slower graveyard decks, Reanimator is a different story because Reclaimer is more relevant on the play, and on the draw it's still okay, but I wouldn't keep it just. I wouldn't keep a hand just because of Reclaimer on the draw. the force, relevant there because they don't have as many creatures yet. Yeah, I definitely agree with that. You don't want to give them a window to hardcast Hogak, especially if you don't have Caracas in your sideboard, which I don't think you did. I think yeah, I think so far like your play has been pretty clean. Um, like I'm not gonna nitpick little things in general because again, like I said, I realize it's difficult for most players to play perfectly. Not it just in general, but especially with this deck over a long tournament. Um, the only thing, like I said, was the once upon a time sequencing. I think can be cleaned up and should be fairly easy to be cleaned up. The other thing was the aggressive mulligans. I don't think you needed to do it here, although it's nice to have it opening hand, right? Uh, Reanimator, I definitely think you can aggressively mulligan, but again, the endurance was good enough. I think out of the seven at least. This hand is kind of insane. So heads up play playing the druid because that gives you the window to get reclaimer turn two. I think a lot of people, well, not a lot, but some people may just autopilot to Green Sun there turn one. So here I would get an Arbor. Yeah. So yeah, pretty clean play so far. Again, the little changes that I would make are either or have been mulligan related for the most part. Two, three. I think you could have attacked with well, let me see. It looked like there you could have actually cast the Green Sun for Reclaimer and then still have Endurance up. So I think I would have done it differently there because the Reclaimer would have given you the third mana for Cradle. You can also actually still have the second Endurance pitch Crater Hoof if need be. So I think that's a mistake. Uh, Again, I think you really need to play. I think you really need to play the Green Sun here because you're kind of locked on mana, right? Like every turn that passes, it's it's kind of like a cascading detriment. What I mean by that is if you get the Reclaimer online early, you get the Cradle online early, which completely changes the game. Here, granted, you still have the other half of the 3/4 tribal, so still decent shape. But yeah, what you're doing is giving your opponent more time, though. The Collector Oof is reasonable, so you don't get combo killed. Yeah, that's what I mean, right? Like you've set yourself back two turns probably by not getting the Reclaimer because, again, of the cascading effect. Um, Sometimes it matters, sometimes it doesn't. But what you do is you reduce your closing speed of the deck, right? Like especially when Cradle is already in your hand, you just want to be able to close out quickly, right? The the general recipe against these combo decks is you want initial disruption, like turns one, two, three, whatever, right? And then you want to close out maybe turns four or five, and then it's already turn five here, so you're giving them a little bit of time to get back into it. Um, I think here looks like you may be able to get away with it because of the collector oof. And the reclaimer can still get the cradle, but it's a lot closer than it needed to be. And here the force ending up not being very good here. What, 7? Maybe they did you just top deck a Cradle here? Actually, you're pretty close to hard casting it too, the hoof. So another thing that the Reclaimer is relevant in this matchup is you can kill bridges by pitching your Arbor. That's relevant too, and it's maybe something that a lot of people are not aware about. Yeah, we leave ourselves somewhat open to alter here. Well, we do have the force, but it's just like not particularly good when they have like a whole bunch of things to sack. And then we got a little bit lucky, I think, to be able to steal this game. Because I think you win a lot earlier instead of it being this close. Agreed, they should have attacked all. But yeah, I think you win this game comfortably if you had made the Green Sun for Reclaimer play while keeping up endurance. I think it was like turn 3 or so. Because like I said, you probably slowed your clock down by 2 full turns not doing that. Uh, Actually, okay, so I would have led with Green Sun, and here's the reasoning. You have Cradle, whenever you have a payoff in hand, you generally just want to develop mana. Thank you for the subscription, David. Appreciate it. So for those who don't know, David goes to my LGS. Uh-oh, looks like a stifle. So I think there, what I would have done was I would have actually just played the Green Sun for 1. What is going on? I would have played the Green Sun for 1. If they daze it, then I play the fetch. If they let it resolve, then I play the Visionary because we test for daze already. Um, yeah, I think especially given your opponent plays Stifle, you definitely want to fire off, develop your mana, right? Like you can't afford to try to play around daze, and I typically will not. Like you're essentially dazing yourself by not doing that play, and then even worse, but you don't get the payoff of having played around it, right? So I tend to be more aggressive against these tempo-based strategies with just developing my mana and not worrying about having a payoff because the the deck tends to top deck really well. And while there's no like, end goal in like scavenge use to play towards anymore, especially post board for the way I board. But this is game 1. You still have the natural, the creative hoof in hand, right? Hitting the visionary there was just to try to cut your mana, I think. I think this is solid here. We can get Green Sun for 2 and then cast Endurance. Like pretty insane draws, to be honest. Like, and I think here you wanted. I think I would have main phased the endurance there because right here you give your opponent a window to respond. What they can do is they can bolt your shepherd into daze your endurance. When you say BR, are you talking about uh, UR in terms of U being blue? B is usually for black, right? But yeah, what I mean, I don't know if you caught it earlier, Chris, but yeah, you gave your opponent a window to bolt your shepherd and then potentially daze your endurance. So that could have been game losing. I don't know if you saw recently in my Discord or not. I am not a fan of trophy anymore because I think especially if you are on 2 to 3 Besage, we just don't need it anymore. And a 2 mana clunky spell It's just not where I want to be in Legacy. I think I want either free spells or one mana spells in the sideboard. Yeah. So the ley line here is something that I know some players would like to do. I know Yer mentioned this a little bit in his Google Docs. I personally am not a fan of ley line, but I will say if you are really really struggling with the Delver matchup, it's kind of a hail mary, and you can get a little bit lucky if you have a game one, right? I mean, turn one. But me, I tend to not like it because I don't think I need that kind of variance, if that makes sense. Like, if you feel good about the Delver matchup, then I would not do it. If you feel like it's your only chance, then I think that's more reasonable. Let me pause it for a second. I can't actually. I can. I don't. I didn't see how many creature cards were in the graveyard, but it looks like how many cards are in their hand. Two. Yeah, it looks like it's two. I probably would. I don't. I in general, I would try not to evoke my endurances unless I'm already way ahead on cards. Yeah. So I think there I probably would just not even. I would save the trophy for the Murktide Regent, and then because I don't like to evoke endurance, and then if I can, I will play around days with a three drop, but um, I'm not gonna hold off on casting it just for the sake of playing around days, though. If that makes sense. Hey, Legacy Council, how's it going? Congratulations on finishing second in the showcase, by the way. I think there's a fine line between evoking it and not. If you're unsure, um, I think a general rule of thumb is to not do it. Uh, but if you're ahead on cards, it can be the correct play. I just don't think it's a winning line to evoke when you're even or behind cards. I used to never do it, but I do it a little bit more often now because there are certain times where it's correct. Yeah, so this is gonna lock up the game, I think. Oof, that's annoying. Yeah, sometimes they have it as a one-off. I probably would not have played around it either. Given that you have the token there, I don't think it's a big deal. Sometimes I see it as a one. I can't imagine it's like two though. I think you should block here. Yeah. A little bit of a sequencing thing again because bog comes in tap. You want to grist plus first before bogging, in case they do something in response to the like stagflow or something, the trigger. Like generally not gonna matter, but it can. So that's the thing, Legacy Council. I actually think a lot of L players struggle with that matchup right now because I found it's hard for a lot of other players to play the deck perfectly, and unfortunately, it feels like the Delver players. Well, I've had people tell me it feels like the Delver player is casting spells at random and they still lose, which is a bad feeling to have, right? Like it's why I've seen things like Leyline being played that I think is, I don't know, if I'm being quite frank, a little bit desperate. Like yeah, if you have nothing else, and you really cannot, play. I would say you probably have to get at least 90% or so of optimal play against Delver to probably win. And I think most L players are having trouble approaching that number at the moment. And the problem is, the Delver players can play as low as maybe 70 to 80% and probably still win because of the way the gameplay is constructed with Murktide region is in particular. It feels like from what I've seen it a little bit from my perspective as well, but less so because I'm a little bit more I have more experience with the deck. But other players just tell me, yeah, it feels like they're just casting spells at random and beating me, which is tough, right, to swallow. The other thing is the deck is just inherently tough to play. So I don't think you can just pick up this deck 2 days before and do well with it. I think if you play L's before, it hurts you actually to learn this version because you kind of have to unlearn some habits. I think the Nettle version, the traditional version, is easier to play, but I think that version is even rougher against, pun not intended, against Delver at the moment because of not having a 3/4 body that is answered by that's cannot be stopped by Bolt, right? Um, and also the more combo you or more combo slash reliance on synergy your deck is, the more Delver can pick it apart in general. That's why like decks like Show and Tell have a tough time against Delver because they have a lot of dead cards otherwise. Let me see. I'm gonna go back. Good question. I think it's here, right? When it happened. Oh, never mind. I missed it already. Oh, I see. You're asking about Once Upon a Time here, in response to okay, to dig for lands. This one is close because you have 3 mana instead of two. If you had only 2 mana, I definitely fire off the once. I think with three, actually, it's probably fine. If this hits a land, you can play a Visionary. So I think I like this a lot. So great question, Chris. In general, I think what's underappreciated about the Once Upon a Time, people say it's a bad card to have in the turns 4 or 5 ish, right? Or sorry, turns 2, 3, and 4 or so, right? I kind of disagree because sometimes you just really need to hit land drops, and here you found the Cradle, which is nice, right? And you were able to at least push your board a little bit further as a result. So I do like that play a lot, and I think it's an underrated play that a lot of players don't make. I think the natural instinct there is to glimpse and hope to draw 2 lands or 1 land off the 2 draws off Visionary and glimpse, right? So I don't. I think that's fine. I think yeah, you definitely want to play Cradle there. In general, a question that I get asked a lot is when do I play around? Oh, by the way, that's a mistake. I think you pitched the Arbor, if I were to correct. Yeah, I think you pitched the Arbor. I definitely pitched the Visionary there because you want to, like, more than anything else, mana matters in this matchup. And if they wasteland your Cradle, you're just so far behind. Right? You want to be able to slam essentially another natural order as soon as possible. Yeah, we did not. Wait, what? No, this is not my Moto account. The Gandalf is Ming Empire. I think that's reasonable what you did there, given that they were there, given that you still had two turns. Yeah, I don't know what you're talking about, Legacy Council. I don't know of these alternate accounts. But yeah, I would say shout out to Chris there for the heads up. Actually, I don't think it showed me how you sideboarded, did it? Um, Also, this is a little bit of a different matchup because we haven't seen Jeskai Delver in quite a while. But in general, against blue red, I don't. I personally don't like natural. If you have enough spots to bring in for it, but uh, I think if you need more of a training wheels, like essentially a free win, it can be reasonable at least to keep maybe one to two and then just the hoof and just board out the Archon, right? I think that's like okay. I am really, really against Leyline though because that's kind of essentially saying, in my opinion, you do not think you can win a game that goes long otherwise. When you board in Leyline, that is, and if you think you can't, then okay, that's fair. But I do not think the matchup is as bad as some people think it is. Yeah, so I think this should be a pretty good matchup in general. I think against this deck, I don't know the exact list off the top of my head. I'll be honest. As a general rule, I think of thumb, because there's no not dread horde, I'm still have PTSD, I guess. Because there's no DRC, endurance is not as good. But I still probably would just board out the natural order package. Am I still on 1.5 speed? I think I am, yeah. So shout out to Chris by the way for so this offer is essentially up for any of my Patreon subscriptions. There is a line uh, in theory, but as of right now there is no line. So if you just want me to review your replay, you can just subscribe immediately and I'll look at it and you'll be first in line. Um, it just so happened here that Chris was the first person to ask, since himself actually he was a previous person as well. So that is one benefit, and it doesn't matter what tier subscription. Obviously, the higher tier gets priority, but there is no queue at the moment. And obviously, anytime somebody puts in a request for this, everybody benefits too, or other elf players, I should say. Hold on. Yes. Yeah, we are reviewing Achilles' run at the moment. Achilles is Ming Empire in the Twitch chat. Is it incorrect to fetch for Arbor there? Where? Let me see. Let me go back. Oh, I think I already passed it, but see, this is also what I mean by I really do not against these Delver strategies. I really don't like not using mana every turn because you naturally fall behind. Um, so I definitely would not have made the play that you made. I think I saw. Like if it means I tap into daze, like so be it. Like I don't think you're gonna win by just dazing yourself by default there. But I believe what you mean here is yeah, I would not fetch Arbor here. I think that's what you're talking about, Chris. Let me see. I don't. This thing's blocking my view, but I think they have. I can't tell how many cards left in their hand. The reason being is because if they have a removal spell, you're gonna have to actively play in today's now. I think you don't want that to happen, right? Because I want to just. Well, let me rephrase that. I want to be able to slam natural order regardless. Like we drew the grist, so that changes our line. Yeah. So I definitely would not do that because if they have the removal spell, you can't cast natural order, and so I would not have made that play. In general, against these Delver decks, I fetch Arbor a lot less, and I am more willing to just commit creatures that are not lands and susceptible to removal. You don't want your mana to be ever constricted against these tempo strategies. But yeah, I would not have made that play. I think I would probably have fetched for just a second Bayou. Here, I believe it's correct to slam the Grist into days. And I would fetch Bayou because you're already susceptible to Wasteland anyways, right? So that's the other mistake. And then we lose our Grist here, which I think we can do. I think you want it once, yeah. The other War would I would probably just play it. Um, so the other cannon is out, and so the glimpse is dead anyways. You want to be able to slam natural order next turn. Yeah. So we got punished, right? I think this game is actually again I can't tell how many cards they have, but if they don't have counter magic, you get I don't know if you board it in Progenitus or not. No, no, no. You. Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, you can't do it. Yeah. Okay, that's fair, Ming or Chris. Uh, yeah. So unfortunately, we lost that there. I again, yeah. I generally don't like natural order in this matchup because it can be hard to get to it, right? Depending how your opponent plays too. If you see that your opponent is letting you develop your mana and just waiting to counter the payoff, then that's probably more reasonable. But as a general rule of thumb, I don't think most opponents will play like that. I think they will attack your mana. Also, most legacy players, I think, or just players in general, have an itch to cast spells, and if they have the removal, I don't think they're gonna hold it. I think there you let the wasteland resolve first before casting, like small little thing, so you don't tip your hand. Yeah, I don't like fetching there again. For the you're like turning on your opponent's wastelands. Yeah, that's okay, I guess. Given that you had the Besiju. I think you saw Delver though, right? Chris, in the other games? I could be wrong. Hey Hugo, how's it going, man? We're just reviewing. Ming Empire, Gandalf 13. Their name is Chris. Their legacy challenge from Saturday. Chris notably went 4-2, losing their win in which is this match here for Saturday's challenge. And I think a few things I would clean up against these tempo-based strategies, but aside from that, pretty clean play overall. The other thing I would change is probably, um, and this is an easy fix, I think, just like fetching before Once Upon a Time if you know you already have land drops, because what that will do is increase the chances of a better hit off Once Upon a Time. Small miss. Well, actually, that didn't matter. I was gonna say we can't cast endurance. Yeah, as a general rule of thumb, I do not advocate like fetching Arbor until you have enough mana, because if they have removal, you just lose, right? All right. I think let me pause that for a second. Here's the list that Chris played. I think it's like a more old school list. When I say old school, it's crazy because like old school just like what 2 months ago. Essentially, this is what a list would look like essentially at the start of Neon Dynasty, which came out. Let me see, Neon Dynasty. It says the release was February 18th, so roughly 2 months ago. And unfortunately, a lot has already changed since then because of the implications of Beseju. It means that I don't actually think we should be running Assassin's Trophy personally anymore. And the reason being is because it covers the same thing, so you don't need the flexibility of Assassin's Trophy. The one thing Assassin's Trophy does do is it does hit Murktide Regent, but I think there are other cards in the deck that you can play that do the same thing. Notably, also, Assassin's Trophy is a lot worse against Temple strategies now because ever since the Ragavan got banned, um, they have 4 Delvers plus 4 DRCs now to stress your removal, and trading 2 mana for one of theirs and potentially even giving them an island or shuffling their brainstorm is pretty bad in my opinion, and no longer necessary with 2 Besages. Grant notably also, Chris drew multiple Besages pretty often, and that's actually kind of why I went back down to 2 for now, personally as well, instead of 3 copies. I think 3 is reasonable, but given that how close the Delver matchup is, even for me at the moment, I think right now, lately my win rate has dipped also against Delver into like even approximating 50%. And I think normally even since I think probably the Ragavan bands probably no higher than 60. So that is something to keep in mind. So I want the cleaner mana base and more access to haymakers like a snuff out that we potentially would play, right? But aside from trophy, I think the list is pretty reasonable. I'm not a fan of Force of Vigor at the moment because I think the matches where Force of Vigor are good is good, namely like 8 cast DNT. We tend to be favored. The exception to that obviously is if you see a lot of 8 mulch, like this can be pretty good. But I think you can play other haymakers that are not as narrow, or that essentially do other things. Like Run Afoul is pretty nice because you can replace the Assassin's Trophy slots with it, right? And having some game against maybe Show and Tell Mirror Age decks. But overall, Chris, I think yeah, at least against the tempo strategies, I think the fetching of the Arbor is ultimately what did you in a lot of those games. The other mistakes were like things that can be avoided, but all over the course of a tournament, hard to avoid in the sense that it's hard to play perfectly. I understand that, like, and something I'm trying to be more sensitive about, if that makes sense, or empathetic about, because I've had a lot, like multiple alpha players come to me and just tell me I cannot play perfectly against Delver, and I need additional reinforcements. Is essentially what they're telling me, and I'm trying to be more understanding. Understanding is probably the right word of that. Um, but with that said, yeah, unless you really don't think you can beat Delver otherwise. I don't personally advertise Leyline of the Void. I think it's kind of a Hail Mary, if that makes sense. Um, but yeah, do not. I think your main mistake, Chris, was fetching the Arbors and losing tempo, right? I think the tempo of Snuff Out is actually more important than uh, the flexibility because of Beseju personally. What would you play instead of Force of Vigor? I think I can just show, I guess, what is my latest list. If okay, I'm gonna close this for a second. Stop. Oops. How do I exit? Okay, there we go. Here is my current latest list. For those who are curious, I have two traps at the moment because I do think there is a soft spot in the deck to storm based or spell based combo. But I understand this card is like high variance in the sense that sometimes a lot of meta games, especially in paper, don't even have storm decks. So that can be something else. Leyline is like pretty reasonable as always. I definitely do like the Caracas because I think in most meta games, like Green White Depths is a good call. What else? So that's kind of what I'm testing at the moment. I think the list is like pretty good. I went notably down to three Once Upon a Time instead of four. My logic for that is twofold. I think one, I wanted to reduce the fail rate of the deck, and one way the deck can fail is drawing multiple Once Upon a Time when it's not desired. And especially now that we're on 21 lands instead of 20, um, I think that is reasonable. Before, when I went up to four Once Upon a Time, Boseiju had not been released yet, so I only had 20 lands, but with nine fetches otherwise. Ever since Boseiju got printed, I want to play 2 to 3 copies. I think four is way too much, but 2 to 3 copies, and I did not want to cut another fetch for the third Boseiju. So what I ended up doing was cutting the second Birch Lord and fitting the 21st land that way. I have not looked back since. I think 21 lands has felt really good with two Besejus as kind of like spell lands. And then I think given the 21st land, we can live without the fourth Once Upon a Time. The other reason is twofold that Chris mentioned. I had in my spare pocket a 61st card that I will not run, but I had a 61st card that is high impact in the sense in the fourth Alstor Shepherd, and I think that is a reasonable power level trade off, right? To trade the fourth Once Upon a Time for the fourth Shepherd. So I've tested this earlier this week and even got a 5-0 the other day with it. Um, so I do like this list because I don't. The last thing I want to do is trade in the fourth Once Upon a Time for something low power level. But the fourth Shepherd is something that didn't feel like I needed, but I can still play, right? And I think that's a reasonable trade off in power level wise, without increasing or reducing increasing the fail rate of the deck, if that makes sense. Given the 21st land and not drawing doubles of the Once Upon a Time. Um, Other areas where I could, reduce the fail rate is reducing, like going two natural order, just one hoof. But I think the power level here is just way too hard not to play. Similarly, same with Glimpse of Nature, right? Maybe we go down to 3 copies, but again, power level wise, we'd be giving up something a lot. And there is no other high power level cards that I'm currently omitting in order to do something like that. So something like that to happen, it would take another printing, I think, on the power level of like Alsor, Shepherd, Reclaimer, or Once Upon a Time, right? But again, I'm not gonna cut like part of a glimpse or a natural order for like a Queen Ranger. Like that to me doesn't make any sense, right? In terms of power level. So actually, that's funny you mentioned that Legacy Council. I tried Yori on Elves earlier this week, just in a league, just for fun, and that's actually how I got the idea of maybe we should reduce the fail rate of the deck. And while the fourth Once Upon a Time initially increased or decreased the fail rate because you would have to mulligan less, I think that is offset by going up to the 21st land that is a Boseiju, right? So there's that. I'm gonna take a quick break right now. I know I've been, at it for about an hour or so, whatever it is, to go over a little more than an hour for Chris's review, and hopefully Chris got a lot out of it. So did the chat, everybody coming in from. Shout out to Tony Murata again. Hopefully chat got a lot of learning out of that. Myself included, just watching like other people play, because I think in addition to improve watching your own replays, you can watch other people play and see what they do differently, and seeing at minimum their thought process behind it. Sometimes they make the wrong play or make the right play, but I think knowing their thought process is probably more important than anything else. Yeah, I'm glad it has, Chris. I think the tough part sometimes is trying to find somebody who has more experience, or uh, yeah, I guess probably that's probably the right word. Who has more experience to watch you play, right? Because they can catch things that you otherwise wouldn't be able to catch. And um, I'm gonna post it here actually, but uh, here are my socials in case you want access to more content. And I'm gonna go ahead and also post the YouTube link. So this is the link to the replay for Chris that he shared with me, and I think anybody who wants to watch can watch Chris's replay here. But yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and take a quick break, and then I'm gonna leave this screen here with my tentative list in the league, and then we'll run through a quick league. And I'll be back in like a minute after using the restroom and getting some water. All right, I am back. Something I was thinking about during the using the restroom right now was also the fetching of the arbors that came up against Delver. I know that the mistake cost Chris there in those matchups, but in general, that tends to be true too. If you if there is a way to avoid being blown out by not having the by having your mana constrained, as a general rule of thumb, that's correct to do. Obviously, there are lines where you get backed into a corner and you have no choice but to go to for greedier lines, and that's a different story. But if all things considered are even, you don't want your mana being susceptible, if that makes sense. Yeah, so that's the other thing. Chris and Inigo are referencing sharing your videos for the benefit of others. I think as a general rule of thumb, the way I got better as a player was, and I'll be honest too, when I first started playing this version of the deck, like there was no Allosaurus Shepherd, and I think the initial versions, like Once Upon a Time, had not even been printed yet. I was making a lot of mistakes, even with Eldritch Reclaimer myself at the time, because the play patterns are just very different. And even after the printing of Once Upon a Time, even after I think Shepherd, it wasn't maybe until like a full year or so after the initial version, maybe so 20 last year 2021, where it finally clicked for me in terms of like the correct sequencing all the time. And as a general rule of thumb, excuse me, as a general rule of thumb, the best way you win is to be able to make mana, and a lot of times what that ends up doing being is having a turn two Cradle right off of Reclaimer. Not, I see a lot of players not make that line, and as like I said, as a general rule of thumb, if you have mana, you're probably gonna beat your opponent with this deck. The way I see it, ways you don't make mana is if your opponent tendrils or Gristlebrand's you turn one. That is one way you never got to develop mana, right? Oh, I'm glad to see that Inigo's videos have helped Chris as well. But I think with that said, this is kind of where I'm at the moment. Obviously, the sideboard is pretty flexible, but um, we can adapt for certain metas as needed. And I will go ahead and start league, I guess. Oh, Floatrue is first now. Well, tied with G Hash. Did not realize that. I think the last time I streamed, we might have 4-1. I don't forget, but not too recently. Sorry, not it's not too long ago. I should say. We did have a back-to-back 5-0 on stream, which is pretty nice. So, thank you for the follow, Dan. So Neely D is, I'm assuming Dan Neely. Let's see. Oops. No problem. Take care. Have a great Easter. I know Chris was busy today, and unfortunately, this is the day I could stream. So, but thanks for coming by. All right, we'll see how we do here. I don't recognize this username. Uh, ooh, this hand is not great, if I'm being honest. But the way I see it is like I would keep this if this was a 6, so I'm just gonna keep and YOLO it. Uh, I kept the Druid there because we have a second land drop already, and I think we just want to play spells. A little bit punished with that being a Delver on the other side. I think here we're gonna play the Cradle, and then it because we have to play the Cradle anyways. There's an argument to be made to leave. Actually, I probably should have done that. To leave the Reclaimer up. But granted that I had the Heritage mana, I want to be able to deploy the Endurance 3 days. So a little bit punished here, right? Took a greedier line and got punished. Also, slight mistake by me here. I should have attacked first before playing the Arbor. They're gonna bolt my Reclaimer, I think, or Arbor. No, ooh, that's okay. I can live with that. um, there's a couple of things we could do here.